tools at your fingertips. CMI creates workplaces full of inspiring leaders. With its on-demand resources, network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations. Search CMI Confidence today.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Communicating and Influencing Key Skills for Success digital event. My name is Mary, and I am the events coordinator at CMI. Don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box, and we'll answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A. I'll now hand over to Kamaya, who is the first Vice President of CMI Sri Lanka Regional Board, to begin today's event.
Hi, good evening. Hope I'm audible.
Hi, Kamaya, it's now over to you.
So thank you so much. And we're good to start, I suppose. Can I just have a heads up again?
Yes, we're all good to go. It's over to you now, Kamaya.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone, joining in from different parts of the world. So welcome to our exclusive webinar dedicated to exploring the pivotal role of effective communication and influencing in navigating today's complex global landscape. So we're in an era marked by unprecedented challenges in global politics, be it business, governments, and individuals who face a myriad of uncertainties. Geopolitical tensions, trade disputes, and shifting alliances, which create a volatile environment where communication breakdowns are all too common. So whether it's just merely misinterpretation, information overload, or cultural differences, these failures can hinder collaboration, innovation, and progress, especially for us as managers. So in today's webinar, we hope to delve into the challenges amidst global politics, dissecting the root causes of communication breakdowns, and offer practical techniques to bridge the divide and foster meaningful connections. So through real-world examples and case studies and discussions, we hope to provide the insights for you today. So on that note, let me just quickly introduce to you our eminent panel who are going to add value and contribute to today's discussion. So we have all the way from Malaysia, Mr. Taranjit Singh, who is the CEO of Contents Pet Advisory in Malaysia. And he has over 2.5 decades of experience in a variety of sectors, including working and residing in various geographical regions and having had the opportunity to see how different societies and cultures operate and work. We also have today the president of CMI Sri Lanka Regional Board, Professor Ajantha Dharmasiri, who is a rare combination of being a chartered manager, chartered HR professional, and a chartered electrical engineer. He is an acclaimed as a conference speaker, corporate trainer, strategy consultant, author, and academic. We also have joining us today from the CMI Sri Lanka Regional Board, our very own secretary, Dr. Thesara Jayawardena, and she was the head of the Department of Industrial Management and is also the Director of Business Research Unit of the Faculty of Business of the University of Moratua. So she holds a degree, BSc Engineering degree in Materials and Process Engineering from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. And she obtained her PhD and MPhil in entrepreneurship from the University of Aldersgate. She is an attorney at law of Sri Lanka with an LLB honours from the University of London and has a Master of Arts in Drama, Theatre from the University of Galilee. So this is your eminent panel for today. And on that note, let me start off the discussion with driving and delving into understanding the framework and the structure for effective communication. So on that, let me pose the first question to Taranjit, to you. Do you think that having a structured framework which enhances communication will also influence strategies? Do you think the structure and having a proper framework is essential? What would your thoughts be on that?
Thank you, Kamaya. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be here amongst these distinguished speakers. So thank you for having us. Let me address your thoughts, Kamaya. Yes, there is definitely a need for us to have a structured approach. There is a framework that we need to look at. Simply because if we don't have that structured approach, we tend to be shooting all over the place. Our thoughts are very irregular in nature. So especially for something as critical and important as communication, messaging, and the way in which we message, the type of purpose that we are using to address these messages are absolutely crucial. To your point, what would be some of the things that we should be looking at? And I'm sure we will deep dive into this over the course of the next half an hour. A couple of things would be making sure that there's clarity, making sure that there is clear direction in the messaging that we're putting across, making sure that the messaging is engaging, and we need to be able to inspire the type of audience that we're looking at, whether it be at a board level or whether it be at an operational level. And the list will continue, and we can talk a little bit more about that over the course of the next 45 minutes, Kamaya. But to your point, absolutely, there needs to be structure and a framework. Back to you, Kamaya.
So adding on, Taranjit, just a little bit more. I know you touched on the word purpose. So what does this role purpose have to do with communication? And how can it improve the level of communication and influencing that we undergo as managers on a daily basis? What does this actually mean?
Well played. Yeah. So as a strategy consultant, I am in human capital advisory. I've been in this space for some time. I played in strategy. You find that the need for purpose is absolutely critical. Why? Because as leaders, we are there to inspire, we are there to promote, we are there to enable, to engage our people, our team members. And one of the things that comes out is the area of clarity. If I don't have clarity of thought, I don't have clarity of purpose, my messaging is all over the place. How am I going to inspire if I don't have that level of clarity? I talked about motivating. Absolutely. In all the messaging that we are, and I've been privileged to be working with some of the board members, some of the chairs of multinationals as well as public listed companies here. You find that motivation is critical because in every messaging that they put across, there's an underlying theme that comes on, and that is engaging and motivating. And it's not done off the top of your head. It's not done off the cuff. There is an innate purpose that comes into play. More critically, the issue of trust. I feel today in the world that we live in, there's a trust deficit. We are devoid of trust more often than not. People are saying a variety of things. Leaders are coming up and talking about a variety of messaging. At times, they're inconsistent. And that's where purpose comes into play. If I have a level of consistency, it builds on credibility. We're not even going down the path of being authentic. We're not even, so all that is a given. Yeah. But if we talk about the level of trust, the level of consistency of messaging, credibility is built. And in that regard, you're now building on this sense of purpose. And finally, the ability to influence. We must be able to go out there to influence the type of people that we have, whether it be internal or external. And if I don't have an underlying purpose, what am I influencing for? Where am I going to head in this discussion that we are having? Does that make sense, Kamaya?
Absolutely. I mean, anything done without a purpose, well, we won't get anywhere in the journey at all. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Professor Ajantha. So we talked a little bit about some aspects, purpose, trust. Professor, do you think you could outline the components of an effective communication and influencing framework? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Kamaya. And may I say, Ayubowan, may you have long life. That's how we greet each other in Sri Lanka. To begin with, I think we need to be brilliant on basics, Kamaya. To have effective communication, we need to understand the fundamentals, and we need to be fantastic with regard to fundamentals. So if you go to the roots of communication, it comes from the Latin word communicare, which means to have something in common, to share. So some other words like community, communion, and so on and so forth. We talk about this sharing aspect. So there's a person who starts communication, the sender. There's a person who is at the receiving end, the receiver. There's a mode in between, and we talk about an exchange of information. It's all about an exchange. And then how effectiveness is this exchange of information depends on, in my view, 3 C's. The contents of the message, and the context in which the message is shared, and then the conduct of the sharer. Contents, context, and the conduct. So all 3 are equally important in order to ensure effectiveness. If the contents are cluttered, and if they are not clear, if they are not concise, if they are not comprehensive, then the reader will not get anything. At the same time, the context has to be understood. The way we communicate in one culture might not be relevant to another culture. There are cultural constraints. There can be language barriers. There can be certain ethical things where we need to be conscious of, certain religious restrictions. We need to respect those. So the context matters. The way we freely communicate in a party, we will not do in a religious place. So the context is different. And of course, the conduct in terms of the confidence and the competence of the speaker as well as the receiver. So we need to be very much open about what is taking place. As Taranji is very correctly said, we need to clearly have a purpose. We need to be purposeful. We need to have a clear meaning in terms of communicating. The whole issue I see, Kamaya, in the world is that we communicate for the sake of communicating, and we have lost the real sense of communication. Sometimes we have information overload. We have TikTok, we have a WhatsApp, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, and sometimes we are overloaded with information. So are we really sensing the communication? Are we really enjoying the communication? And are we really influencing others with the proper communication? Are we doing it in a professional manner? We can talk about this as we move along. Over to you, back. Come on.
Thank you, Professor. And just before I get to you, Dr. Tsara, I would also like to remind our listeners that if you have any questions, please feel free to put it on the live chat, and we would be happy to take it up with the panel who's here. So just a quick reminder on that. And Dr. Tsara, moving over to you. So for you, especially being in the field of academics, how do you see it as a manager in an academic institution? How does this communicating and influencing take place? Doctor, you're on mute.
Sorry, my mic was on mute. I hope I'm clear. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay. Yes, definitely. There's communication and influencing in the context of management, like within an academic institution, involves effectively conveying information, ideas, and directives to various stakeholders. Like we have academics, the students, non-academics, the administrators, while also influencing their thoughts, decisions, and actions towards achieving the organizational goals of the university at large. So, as a former head of the department and director of a research unit in an academic institution, I can actually share some skill sets which I find crucial for several reasons. One is we must have faculty collaboration. Effective communication fosters collaboration among faculty members, promoting interdisciplinary research, sharing of best practices, and alignment with institutional objectives. Then the student engagement. We must have clear communication with the students to ensure they understand the academic expectations, policies, and resources available to them. And influencing student behavior positively impacts their learning outcomes and overall satisfaction. And also engaging with parents, alumni, donors, and the community at large requires persuasive communication to garner support for the institution's mission, programs, and initiatives. And leadership development. Managers serve as role models. So, as academics, as heads, directors, there should be effective communication and influence within the university. So by demonstrating these skills, which this will inspire and develop future leaders among the faculty and staff and students. And of course, crisis management. During a crisis or conflicts, effective communication is very important to mitigate negative consequences, to maintain trust and guide the institution through challenging times. And so to excel in such communication and influencing as an academic in an academic institution and a manager there, I believe we must be clear and transparent so that we ensure messages are concise, coherent, and transparent to avoid misunderstandings and to build trust. And we must tailor communication. We must adapt communication styles and content to different audiences, considering their preferences, their backgrounds, and their needs. And communication involves listening. Actively listen to concerns, the feedback, perspectives from all these students, academics, stakeholders that I mentioned. And we must demonstrate empathy and understanding while listening. And of course, every manager should lead by example. We must model effective communication and ethical influence behavior, setting a standard for others to follow, and build relationships. We must cultivate positive relationships within stakeholders through regular, meaningful interactions, fostering trust and credibility.
Thank you, Doctor, for those insightful.
Communicating these. And so this credibility and persuasiveness. So overall, I feel that effective communication and influence are indispensable skills for any manager, especially for academic institutions, which will enable us to navigate complexities, foster these collaborations, and drive positive changes within each organization that we work for.
Thank you very much, Doctor, and very insightful.
Over to you,
indeed.
Kamaya.
Thank you so much. So moving on, and having explored this framework, structure, key components, let's move on to seeing how this can be applied in the real world. So today's world is full of disruption, and we're presently working on and living in a very chaotic and constantly dynamic world. So how planful do we have to be about our communication and our messaging? Taranjit, would you like to add on to that and give us your insights?
Sure. Thank you for the question, and it's a very wide question touching on a variety of areas. Let me think about this as I'm responding to you, Kamaya. So I started out by being planful. I started out with the communication being clear. That's absolutely, and I think a base fundamental area we need to look at. But one of the things that then drives from that, simply because of the magnitude of disruption that we are facing, the ambiguity that currently exists, the inability to, and this is to Professor Ajanta's point, the inability to have an attention span that is longer than 90 seconds, as an example, with TikTok and what have you. One of the things that then comes across is this level of consistency. I cannot stress that enough. Small, concise, consistent messaging that is going out that prevents dilution. We don't want to dilute this messaging, but more importantly, also that prevents distortion. Simply because of the ambiguity that we're in, there is a lot of distortion, there's a lot of noise. How can I now cut across that noise and provide you with the true essence that I want to put across? So that's the first one. The second thing that comes across very effectively in this disruptive environment is the ability, and Dr. Tashara talked about it, is crisis management. How do I go away to maintain my composure whilst managing? And we are seeing crisis all around us, as we speak, as we act, as we work. And with that comes brand imaging. The implication on our brand image, the implication on the way we are coming across to the market, there needs to be some level of reassurance from us to the stakeholders, to the shareholders, whether it be at a board level or otherwise, that then talks about, you know what, we know what we're talking about. And through this consistent messaging, I'm putting these ideas in a simple, clear, undiluted form. We are not diluting it in any fashion. The area of strategic alignment, Kamaya, is absolutely critical. We need to ensure that there is some level of thought from the strategies that we had identified all the way down to the implementation of these strategies. And in the course of that, communicate what is it that we're trying to put across. So that strategic alignment is absolutely critical. And lastly, in my mind, it's about full engagement. Disruption brings with it a level of uncertainty innately. And with that level of uncertainty, there's a level of fear innately. There's a level of untrusting feeling that I come in. So if I now come in and I talk about bringing you on this journey with a full level of engagement, I start to move away from that mist that we call disruption to provide you with this level of clarity. So to your point, what can we do? I believe that there are these 5-6 things that we can look at, but it has to be done in a very planful, dare I say it, purposeful fashion. Over to you, Kamaya.
Thank you so much. So purpose and planning for it and execution seems to be required to get the desired results. But I'm going to direct a question from which has been now raised by our audience today. And Professor, I'm going to come to you with that. So with the insights from Taranjit as well, the question is how to manage the impact of cultural influences on inter-organizational decision-making. So another dynamic here, we're talking about cultural influences and inter-organizational decision-making. How do we tackle that in communication, effective communication?
Thank you, Kamaya. I think that's a very pertinent and very relevant area where culture is all about a system of shared meanings, the way we do things. The way we do things in one country might be different to the way we do things in another country. So we need to be conscious about certain restrictions, certain constraints, certain peculiarities. Sometimes we might be seen as negative if we are not aware of those things. So for me, the starting point is clear awareness. To whom am I communicating with? In other words, a clear understanding of your target audience. A little bit of homework would be very, very handy. Now, there are plenty of culture studies done. Certain cultures are more open. Certain cultures are more closed. Certain cultures, they encourage people to behave more like teams, interactive. Certain cultures, they are more individualistic. So you need to be aware as to whom you are communicating with. And as I said, Kamaya, it depends on the type of communication, the mode of communication. Sometimes, for example, I'm speaking right now and you are listening right now. And Taranjit is writing something right now. And someone is reading. So listening, speaking, writing, reading, particularly the neglected component of listening, we might take it for granted. I think all four forms should be very much consciously looked into. And as you said, the second part of the question, the inter-organizational communication, it can be formal, it can be informal. It can be a formal mail going from a CEO to the other CEO, or it can be a call by one CEO to the other CEO. So whether it's formal or informal, and whether it's oral or written, it depends. So the starting point is be conscious about the other side of your communication, the other partner in your channel. Second thing is identify similarities as well as differences. There are plenty of case studies if you deal with the Arabic countries, for example. You need to be certain practices, certain rituals we have to be conscious of. And if you deal with a Western country versus if you deal with a South Asian country, there might be cultural differences. The way people greet one another, the way people treat one another. Some cultures are more relationship building oriented. So then you spend more time in building the relationship. Some countries are more results oriented. So then cut and dry, you go for it. I'll give you a real example. I have a friend in Japan. When he sends me an email, he spends about 2 paragraphs asking about my family, describing his family, about the weather, about the country, and then he gets to the topic. Whereas I have a friend in Sweden. He sends an email, just 1 line, have you done that? Is the project over? Is that document finished? That's it. So you see, one culture more relationship oriented, another culture more results oriented. So you have to be conscious. And then, as I mentioned, whether they are more individualistic or they are more collectivistic. These are from Gerd Hofstede's cultural dimensions. I will not get into the details. So the idea is that to be aware, to be open. And inter-organizational communication, the effectiveness depends on this. And again, Kamaya, let me emphasize, when communication breaks down, conflicts begin. To avoid conflicts, we need to have clear communication, clever communication, the right crafted communication, so that it will fulfill the desired expectation, as Taranjit said, in a very strategic manner, in a very purposeful manner, and in a very meaningful manner. That's how I would look at it, Kamaya.
Thanks, Professor. So, Professor, you also mentioned, and it was also mentioned by Dr. Thasara, the importance of effective listening. But I'm going to move on to Taranjit again. So, how does this emotional aspect, or what role does emotional intelligence play in effective communicating and influence? Is it important?
So I'm now going to put on my master coach hat. So I am a master coach with ICF. I've been a coach now with them for many years. And one of the fundamental things that we are taught as coaches is for you to have the ability to listen and the ability for you to question. Those are the fundamental. There are other things, but those are the 2 fundamental. Let's talk about listening. There's a lot that plays out when we look at nuances from and to Dr. Ajanta's point, Professor Ajanta's point, nuances on how the individual commences the discussion. What are some of the nuances that he uses? The sensitivity of those words. Now, as individuals, we come to the table with this level of appreciation. in the language that we are most proficient in. What now happens as you're moving up, and we're talking about leaders and managers specifically, as you're moving up the levels and you're entering into the leadership roles, you cannot underestimate, and you should not underestimate, the value that these emotive views bring to the table. Because if you're not sensitive to it, it just goes over your head. And you are now talking about things that really don't matter to the recipient of the message. This is exactly what Professor Ajanta just stated. Why is it important? Fundamentally, a lot of the feelings and a lot of the emotive thoughts and the emotive perspectives are driven by these couple of words. The moment I get a feel of these words, I can really start to purposefully respond to the, not react, but respond to those messaging. And I think it comes with a level of maturity. It also comes with a level of you purposefully wanting to grow in that area. And if you're not intentionally growing in that area, it becomes a very superficial discussion, which is not what this is about. It has to be purposeful. It has to be intended for those messages that we're trying to put across. Does that make sense, Kamaya?
Absolutely. And again, we come back to that key word, purpose. So everything revolves around it. If we don't have a purpose in anything we do, everything is going to collapse. So Taranjit, absolutely agree. So Dr. Tesara, you're back with us. I think we lost you for a few seconds or a few minutes there. I'm going to direct the next question to you. Am I audible to you, Doctor?
Yes, I am. I hope I'm speaking from a different device. Hope you can hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Right. So I'm going to direct the next question to you. So, Doctor, how often do you negotiate as a leader, as a manager? And what do you think are the common mistakes that we make during negotiations?
Negotiation comes, I suppose, when we talk about negotiation, it is like a day-to-day thing. If you look at a person even going to lunch, you would have to negotiate with your colleagues. But as a manager, it comes on a frequent occurrence when your role is involved in leadership or decision making and managing people. So in an academic setting, this can arise in various contexts, like when we are having faculty recruitments, budget allocations, curriculum development, student grievances, when we are having collaborative partnerships, signing an MOU. What I can tell you, Kamaya, is that there are common mistakes people make during negotiations, especially in the academic settings. First one is failure to prepare. One of the most common mistakes in entering negotiations is without adequate preparation, which includes researching relevant information, understanding the interests and priorities of all parties involved, and developing a clear negotiation strategy. And another thing is lack of active listening, which comes with what Dr. Taranjit and Professor Ajanta mentioned. This communication involves active listening, and the lack of it is coming as a minus for negotiation, because effective negotiation requires active listening by all parties to understand the concerns, needs, and perspectives of the other party. So failing to listen attentively can lead to misunderstandings, miscommunications, and even a breakdown in trust. And also neglecting a win-win solution. Sometimes you want to win for yourself only. Some negotiations focus solely on achieving their own objectives without considering the interests of the other party, which leads to a win-lose outcome. Resentment, it could be a damaged relationship. So instead, negotiators should strive for win-win solutions that address the needs of all parties involved, like bend a little backwards to give that win-win solution. And inflexibility. Being overly rigid or inflexible during negotiations can hinder progress and impede collaboration. It's essential to remain open-minded, adaptable, and willing to explore alternative solutions that meet the interests of both sides. And also poor communication, which is what you're talking about. Effective communication is crucial in negotiations. Yet many people struggle to express their ideas clearly, concisely, and persuasively. So miscommunication or ambiguity leads to confusion, frustration, and stalled negotiations. And lack of empathy, failing to understand others, failing to think from their point of view, their concerns, the emotions of the other party, leads to lack of rapport building, lack of compromise. So empathy actually helps negotiators to understand the underlying motivations and interests driving the other party's position, and overlooking nonverbal cues like nonverbal communications like body language or the tone of voice can convey important signals during these negotiations. So ignoring these cues can result in missed opportunities to address underlying issues or concerns. So as a head of the department with lots of academic staff and students alike, it's crucial for me to be mindful of these common negotiation pitfalls and strive to avoid them. So building strong relationships or fostering open communication, prioritizing collaborative problem solving, having teamwork for these facilitates more productive and mutually beneficial negotiations in our academic context.
Thank you, Doctor. So I'm going to pick your brain on whether you could actually give us a real life example with your vast experience in dealing with people of different aspects. So you have your own academic staff, you have your students of varying ages just coming into their higher studies. So would you be able to share with us an example of a time when you had to convince a person or a group of persons to maybe do something what they initially were reluctant to do? How did you negotiate with them and get them to go for the goal?
All right. All right. Actually, I can think of the time where it was COVID-19 when the pandemic just started. Sri Lanka went for a full lockdown, and Professor Ajantha would vouch for me. We, as academics, we had to teach online fully 100% because everyone was locked down, and we didn't want to stop the students from studying. So now, as a head of the department, now I have to tell people, okay, no more physical lectures. Everyone is in distress, but still we have to start online lecturing. It was a hard task to get this team of educators to actually come online to an online platform to deliver lectures, to have these virtual classes, because everyone was hesitant. They were resistant to this idea because some were questioning the effectiveness of online teaching compared to traditional methods. They wanted to write on the board. They wanted to have proper PowerPoints and ask questions face to face. And there were technical challenges. Some of them were not really tech savvy. They were not really ready to really go online. And then they were thinking, our digital literacy is not sufficient and we don't want to look bad in front of the students. So there were a lot of resistance, but we didn't have a choice because we can't, close the university, the academic activities. So therefore, I thought, okay, somebody has to come up with some ideas of how to address these. So I spoke to the IT division and organized comprehensive training sessions, workshops, like few hours, but so that our lecturers will be familiarized with the online platform, and whatever their technical concerns, we provided solutions and provided guidance of to how to utilize these digital tools for teaching. So this sort of empowered them. In fact, I myself learned digital signing on PDF during the COVID time, I must admit. And then we brought people and spoke about success stories. We have seen how Malaysia, Dr. Taranjit will share with us, in Malaysia and Singapore, they were already doing online teaching in a hybrid mode most of the time. So we spoke about such case studies. We spoke about other educators who had successfully transitioned to online teaching. We highlight the benefits like the increased student engagement, the
Doctor, you're on mute. Doctor, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Dr. Tisara, please unmute yourself. There's something went wrong.
Yeah. Perhaps doctor cannot hear us. So we'll come back to doctor. Doctor, you were on mute. We lost the last part of your conversation.
Oh, really? Have I been mute all along?
No. We just lost the last few seconds of what you were saying.
Which part was it that I was mute, Kamaya?
We lost you at the latter part of your example. You were talking about what was going on in terms of convincing the people to come and the reluctance to take on technology.
Yeah. So very, very briefly, I highlighted the opportunities, brought in some examples from Malaysia and Singapore, and encouraged that we will go back to physical teaching, and everyone worked in collaboration. So through these efforts, like we managed to overcome this reluctance and sort of the skepticism towards the online teaching. And over time, I can say that confidently they are really proficient in this so much that they demand nowadays that we have the lectures online fully, but we are going behind and saying, no, we must have physical lectures as well. So I think in a very small sense, it's the communication and how to communicate effectively, how to negotiate with people, because everybody had their concerns. I had my concerns. The university had their concerns. So I think effective communication is addressing all the needs and finding a win-win solution which benefits all the parties involved.
Thanks, Doctor. So being assertive and coming to a win-win conclusion, key aspects. I'm going to pick up quite an interesting question dropped by one of our audience members, a little different as well. And I'm going to direct it to all our panel members to see what their response would be. The question is, if you could communicate one message to humanity they would accept without question, what would it be and why? Who'd like to go first?
Can I try?
Yeah, Professor, please do.
Live and let live.
Nice.
Simply because we are all humans. We have to be humane. We have to uphold humanity. When there's war and destruction around the globe, and when we are eroding the resources for the future generations, and then so it's all about we are self-centered, we are selfish, we are looking only at our needs. So we need to ensure that we live, at the same time we allow others to live, we encourage others to live, we help others to live, we support others to live. So my message is live and let live.
Thank you, Professor. Would anyone like to add on? Yeah, please do.
Taranjit, you're mute.
I think you're mute. Yes, you're mute. We cannot hear you.
So this is something which I've always abided by. And the rationale is around being vested in the success of others. If everyone is vested in everybody's success, we as a collective whole will lift ourselves to the next level. But unfortunately, this is to Professor Janta's point, we are selfish. What's in it for me before I give it to you? And when that is the case, we are always putting the other guy down. No. Let's be vested, personally vested in the success of others. That's my message. And you do that, in my mind, everything will move up. Whether you like it or not, it will naturally move up. That's a communicating message I'll put across, Kamaya.
Beautiful, Taranjit. I think I'm going to quote you going forward on that. That's amazing set of words. Super to live by. Dr. Tesara, would you like to try?
Well, yeah, I think after those beautiful thoughts, I just have to add my 2 cents, which I live by. Be grateful for each day, because somebody somewhere out there is not as um, lucky as you. So I'm always grateful. I'm always empathetic. I always think. So my message would be to treat others the way you would like to be treated. So always put you in that their shoes, and then it will make sense to you, and you will have more empathy, more kindness, more compassion. So being grateful and being empathetic will lead the day for me to be peaceful in the end.
I think it's a great question. I mean, we live in an environment where what's in it for me is the first question you get from anyone you work with before anything gets done, and that seems to be the norm, which leads to a lot of barriers. So all your points are well taken and well noted, and I think it's something that we really need to think about in our lives as managers, as leaders of organizations, and of other various institutions as well. So thank you very much. So I'm going to pick another question, and I would like to put it to the panel in total again, and let's discuss your varying views on this. So the next question is, how does one balance response and reaction in the areas of handling conflict or pressure at work? Any volunteers?
In
May
the
I take
absence
this?
of any, sorry, Taranjit, please go ahead.
No, sir. Please go ahead. Please go ahead, sir.
Please go ahead. So, response and reaction. So they say response and reaction in the area of handling conflict or pressure at work. I think conflict handling is one of the commonest areas that we need to face in our stressful workplaces, which are under pressure. Either we are target driven or we are surrounded by KPIs. Sometimes the key performance indicators ended up as key political indicators or key pressurized indicators. So what happens is we need to the balance between response and reactions. I think as Taranjit mentioned, and I think Dr. Tesara used one key word, empathy. So we might have an emotional reaction rather than an empathetic response. So what happens is, if you look at the way we emotionally getting charged, and we have the negative emotions, we are getting angry, we are getting hungry, and we try to react with those emotional impulses. Instead, if you can respond with a mature manner, if you can respond in a way that we understand the whole thing. So let me reiterate what Dr. Tesara said, the importance of empathy, looking from the other's point of view. Sometimes we are selfish, looking only from my point of view. My way is highway. So I'm right, you have to align with my thinking. So that will be the decay. Instead, you need to be open enough, have that abundance mentality. You are willing to listen to other person. Empathic listening is very, very rare. You have to listen from another's point of view, and then why that conflict has arose so far. So what is the stake that the other person is insisting? Can we reach a win-win situation, as we say? So my 2 cents worth response is basically, rather than reacting emotionally, you need to have that mature response with a broader understanding and the right purpose in mind. That is tough, and that needs experience, that needs exposure, and that needs a little bit of expertise.
Thanks, Professor. Taranjit, would you like to add on?
Sure. There's really nothing much to add now, but let me give it a go. So thank you, Dr. Ajanta. So my take on this is always looking at it from the ability to respond positively in everything that happens. You talk about conflict at work. As a manager of people, there is always an ability to respond positively, even when having difficult conversations. You do an injustice to Dr. Ajanta's point if I approach it emotionally. You do an injustice not only to yourself, but to the other guy who's receiving these comments. So we need to take a step back. And it's easier said than done, admittedly. It requires practice, it requires training, which is why you go through different courses as managers. I mean, I grew up in the Price Waterhouses of the world. I grew up in the Aon Hewitts of the world, and Hay Groups. They actually put you through purposeful training and development to build these sort of skills. And to this aspect, resilience becomes a critical area. How do I ensure that I'm resilient when I come to handle these sort of things? I'm not reacting, but I'm approaching from a holistic perspective. And when that plays out, you do justice to the other person because you're putting across a point of view which is well considered. And that balancing act that you come up with has to be done intuitively. I mean, you've got to think about this from an apathetic perspective before you are now responding to this. So I would actually take that, let me count to 10 type of a rule before I respond to the discussion that we are having, if it's a really emotionally charged discussion in this regard. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Dr. Thesara, what is your take?
Just looking at the question from Mr. Dim, response. Sometimes we respond, just automatically, like as but a reaction could be sometimes an initial, like a sudden one, or it could be something that we can think and react. So I believe we can vice versa. We can interpret it in a different manner, but especially in conflict handling. As a counselor, I myself do a lot of conflict handling, or at least listen to them as a mediator. We can say like there are assertive ways of handling, there are mediators ways of handling, or we can be like a judge, like in a judiciary way of handling. So as you can see, like in the UK court system is different from USA, where we follow the same from the Dutch time, the UK law. We listen to both parties and give a judgment. Sometimes in the USA, the judge is involved. He asks further questions for clarification. So especially when you're looking at the conflict handling, or perhaps the pressure a person or a group is having, so it's always good to use different response or a different reaction according to the situation. But how do you balance it? Again, is up to the person who is going to be the negotiator or the mediator or the communicator. You have to really understand where each party is coming from, adding to what Dr. Taranjit and Professor Ajanta mentioned, and so reacting accordingly to the situation given, understanding the situation, identifying both parties and then or the more parties involved, and accordingly deciding whether to respond or react in response to that.
Thanks, Doctor. So, Professor, there is a question directed to you. The question is, what is the solution in influencing through communication when the 3 C's you mentioned fail? That is conduct, context, and content.
What is the solution? Okay, my simple answer is commitment. You need to commit yourself to have that perseverance, keep on communicating, keep on having faith in your process, never leave away from the process, keep on trying. As Winston Churchill said, never, never give up. Communication is tough. It's a tough terrain. Sometimes there can be a lot of mismatches, a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of misgivings. So there you need to have that persistence. So when your contents are not good enough, when the context you have not understood enough, when your conduct has some problems. So it's again revisiting and reviving and refreshing and restarting the process. So it's still worth. So my point is commitment. Commitment ensures that you have the 3Cs intact, and 3Cs together will give you the coherent result.
Thanks, Professor. So the solution is another C, commitment, which would basically engulf and guide the other 3Cs to make it successful. Thank you for posing that question, and thank you, Professor, for the answer. So we can't really leave any discussion today without moving into technology and how we can adapt with it. So on that note, Taranjit, I'm going to ask you this question. So in this world of AI and all technology, different types of agile technology which keeps popping up that we live in, and of course we can't now forget ChatGPT and the others, how does effective communication play a part in this ever-changing technological advanced world?
Good question. Let me chat GPT it.
No.
And so that's a very good question. And I play in this field. We talk about disruptive leadership. We talk about innovative platforms. And as part of the work that I do is actually building the capabilities of leaders and of organizations to drive that. So allow me an opportunity to respond to that, Kamaya. I think we cannot leave it purely to the AI platforms to craft out messages. It's already playing out, but we cannot leave it entirely to the AI platform. Why is that? Several reasons. One, the contextualizing of messaging is not fully appreciated by the platforms. We contextualize as man or woman or humans, we contextualize that message. So there is a sensitivity that comes into play when we are talking about contextual understanding as we're crafting the purpose of that message. The second one is around emotional intelligence and empathy, what Dr. Tashara had mentioned earlier, followed up by Professor Ajanta. If I don't have a level of empathetic slant in my messaging, I'm not able to connect with you. Very simple. And that connectivity is important because that will then lead to inspirational perspective. It'll lead to motivational perspective and everything else in between. Which platforms today, at least right now, are not able to do that. It's very flat, the way their communications is done. The third one is around ethical considerations. Now, in all the work that we do, in the stuff that we intuitively touch on ethical considerations, whether it be biasness or whether it be diversity or whether it be inclusiveness. There are these things that we innately talk about, which platforms, at least at this point in time, because of the way the algorithms are written, are not able to respond to. And the last one, I would imagine, if we talk about this, would be the area of relationship building. I'm a computer scientist myself, and like Dr. Tashara, I'm also a lawyer. So I did law and computer science as my undergraduate. I went on to do my master's in law, specializing in IP. And one of the things that came out of that is how far can we push the platforms to build relationships? Platforms don't build relationships because they're governed by ones and zeros. They're governed by algorithms. Whatever I give to you is what comes out, whereas the relationship aspect is more innate, it's deeper, and that's about the area of humanity that we are now trying to exude. So to your question, can I chat GPT it? Of course I can. But will it make the same sense? No, it won't. That's my response to you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Amaya, if I am to add one thing to what Taranjit said, to summarizing, AI, EI harmony is what we need. High tech, high touch harmony. Otherwise, high tech without high touch will not work.
Good one.
AI without EI will not work. That's
Good
my
one.
summarizing of what he said.
I like it.
Thank you. So, as a very last question for the session, unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I'd like all of you to very quickly contribute to this last question, which is we've looked at inhibiting factors of technology, but how can technology be transformed to basically influence and effectively communicate? What are the opportunities that technology would add to how we do things and how we can communicate? So I'd like to end on a positive note, and technology is key. So we'd like to do a round with you contributing to the answer to this question. Dr. Tasara,
Yeah,
perhaps
I'll
you'd like
start, I think, because I think the two wise gentlemen would have more wiser things to say. I think technology should not be seen as an enemy. I mean, compared to decades ago, we are in a much better place of communication because of technology. I think it's the misuse of it, whether it's technology or environment or whatever it is, it's the mankind, the human that goes and misuses it. But the people who discover it have actually done a great service by discovering all these platforms, all these tools and methods of technology. So I think in terms of communication, it's a blessing that we have all these ways to communicate. It's a blessing that we have this right for our communication, the right to understand, the right to truth, right to see what are the things we can pinpoint injustice if there is any. So I think while teaching the younger generation, the future generation about the ways to use the technology and the tools, we must also teach them the ways of properly using these tools to ensure that it's not mishandled, it's not misused, but it's used with the proper diligence and with integrity, so that it will be a great asset for everybody. Yep.
Thanks, Dr. Thanks, Doctor. Professor, over to you to very quickly share your thoughts.
Well, technology can be a versatile servant, but a volatile master. So don't start with technology. I think you should have the mindset, skill set, and then the tool set. Don't start with the tool set. Start with the mindset, then the skill set, then comes the tool set, which is the technology.
Taranjit?
Wow, I love that. I swear to you, I'm going to take that away, Dr. Ajanta. So I've learned a lot today. So my 2 cents worth, if it's worth anything, Kamaya, is the fact that we cannot do away with the platforms that we see today. And to ignore it does you an injustice, not only for you as a leader, but for you as an organization, which therefore means I have to utilize it in order for me to drive productivity or to drive innovation and everything else in between. But the point now remains is, do I have the necessary thinking process? Do I have the necessary thought process for me to ask? And I like Dr. Ajanta's point. It is a tool, and that's all it is. Do I have the necessary thought process that allows me to effectively utilize this tool in as best a fashion that I possibly can? And if I don't have that skill set, it becomes very awkward because I'm now dependent on the technology to provide me with answers. And by golly, half the time, and ChatGPT says this, do not take these answers as is. Please go away and validate it. There's a little caveat that they have right at the bottom. So, we have to take that into account. And as leaders, as managers, and as upcoming students who are entering into this field, we need to ensure that those skill base are there, the necessary competence are there in order for us to effectively utilize the platform. I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Taranjit, and to every eminent member of this panel today for sharing your insights and experience. And So, from building strong relationships and inspiring change to driving business growth and shaping public opinion, the ability to communicate and influence effectively sets the stage for achievement and impact. So, with those concluding remarks and thanking all of you for spending your afternoon, evening with us today, I'll hand it back over to Mary from CMI. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So that's it for today's session. Thank you to Prof. Ajanta, Taranjeet, Dr. Tessara, and Kamaya for your insight and expertise. Please stay tuned to hear more about CMI membership, and thank you all for joining us.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.